Good morning. Denise Dryden here. I'm broadcasting this morning from Whitefish, Montana, after making a long drive yesterday. So I want to tell you a little bit about that drive first. And notice that I'm on this peaceful farm. You can't really see the mountains out behind me, but there's mountains all above this tree line. And the topic for today is called Wide Open Spaces. And I've got ducks in the background, so just enjoy that sound. Last week we did a discovery on the idea of subjugation. You know, what happens when we power over? And it was huge. And I'm not sure how I've been able to integrate it. It's still sort of mulling around and working. It's still working its way into my thoughts. And it was just perfect that I had this retreat this week that I have to do for my families that I coach on Flathead Lake Wednesday through Sunday. So it makes sense to sort of drive out here, get settled, enjoy Montana, enjoy the space. But the biggest part is the road trip. The road trip for me, 8 to 10 hours of just wide open space, gives me time to integrate. So I did something that was sort of interesting. I purchased Brene Brown's Braving the Wilderness, which is her new book. And if you've listened to Brene Brown, what I like about her initial books is that they're very well documented in research. And they bring you into what vulnerability really is about and courage. This one, she just takes all the stops off and she provides killer research, but then also tells her own story and really stretches herself. So it's like a 4.5-hour tape or, Audible. So I would listen to a chapter or so and then turn it off and then just look at the mountains or look at the farmland and let it all sink in. And then I pull over, get a cup of tea somewhere, write down my notes, put it all together, and then keep moving through this. And it took me 10.5 hours to make an 8-hour drive. However, Brene Brown and I did some really deep discoveries. So I'm really happy that I had already broadcasted that the topic for today was going to be wide open spaces. So space can be space and time, space and energy, and the space in between what we do, what we think, what our actions are, right? So our thoughts, our actions, our schedules, space to nurture ourselves. How often do we create that kind of space? And when we have it, what do we do with it? So in this book, Braving the Wilderness, Brene Brown talks about the wilderness as being both, what happens when you go into the wild, and it's dangerous, and there's snow on the ground, and it's icy, and it's dark, and there's deer on the road, right? And I'm driving from Libby into Whitefish at 7:30 when it's pitch black. Or what is the wilderness inside, that wild, unknown territory where you haven't gone before? And combining those two on that drive was fascinating. She says that the wilderness is a refuge for beauty, that it's solitude, vulnerability, that it's where we seek space for contemplation, and it's where we belong to ourselves. So when we give ourselves time and space, what we do is we give ourselves a little bit less pressure, a little bit less compacted energy, and it's a way for us to address when we feel overwhelmed, when too many things are coming at us and too many balls in the air. And quite frankly, the idea of letting subjugation and, the powering over enter into me and hold it has been overwhelming all week. Because it's huge. And as we march and as we talk and as we create new systems, we need to keep looking at that. So, how do we become less overwhelmed? I'll give you a personal example. In 1995, I was living in McKinney, Texas with my husband and 3 kids. I think the oldest was 7. And the youngest was 2. So we had 5 years, 3 kids, right? Lots of activity. My husband traveled. He was gone most of every week. And I was raising 3 kids in a state, in a town that I didn't know by myself. And what I noticed was that instead of dealing with it, I filled it with busyness. I filled it with coffee dates, with play dates, with volunteering at the schools, with doing everything. And it sort of hit its peak in 1995 when I had an elementary school, a preschooler, and a toddler, and I had a girlfriend who had blocked off like 2 hours in the morning for us to just sit down and have a really good cup of coffee and catch up. And she called and she canceled. And I remember that day like it was yesterday, because what happened was I didn't know what to do with downtime. I didn't want downtime. I would do anything to avoid downtime. And the voices, the feelings, the bubbling up started happening. And I just remember laying on the couch and sobbing and thinking, I can't keep this pace up anymore. And it was that led us, that sort of breakthrough that led us to deciding to move to Bend into the mountains to give our children lots more space and time, and to give me lots more space and time, and to give our family lots more space. So giving ourselves conscious time and space, what does that give us, right? It gives us a way to calm down our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous systems. It means that we're out of fight and flight. We're out of that cortisol spread all the time. And it gives us time for that to calm down. It also gives us a chance to deepen our breath. And when we deepen our breath and we breathe from our chest and our belly, what happens is we put oxygen into our body. And our body needs that kind of oxygen. We need that kind of calm breathing. Like I said earlier, it gives us a chance for the overwhelm to calm down. Sometimes we see our kids checked out playing video games or listening to music or drawing or doing something. And what that's doing is that's letting them integrate all of the busyness of their schedules. So we need to give them time to do that. We need to give ourselves time for our experiences to integrate and to know how much time we actually need. When I worked in Portland, in the trade show industry way back in the early 20s, I would work these horrendous back-to-back shows. And as soon as I had 2 days off, I'd get in the car and go to the Metolius and sit leaning against a Ponderosa with my feet in the Metolius River. And I'd just sit there and breathe and go, come on. And after 2 days, I could go back to work because it was what I needed to do to restore, to reintegrate. So this is an opportunity to connect to ourselves. It's where we get to hear the questions that we're not really listening to. That tap, tap, tap. Hey, by the way. It's like, it's where we get our ahas. Like driving yesterday, it's like, oh. When we're talking about powering over, we talk about dehumanization, which is a huge part of what our culture is experiencing now. Oh, when we're dehumanizing each other, how do we start to rehumanize, which is going to be a topic down the road. What do we notice? What do you notice? What are you paying attention to? What's getting your attention? And what is getting your attention because it wants to happen? So this is a chance to restore to your true self, to be back into sort of like, oh, I remember her. I know who she is. It took me a little while to find her again because we got a little lost in all that busyness or in that chaos. And there's a term that Trace Hobson through the Transformational Presence uses, which is to live life at the speed of presence. To be in your body, to be able to breathe, to be able to hear what's going on, to be able to see what's going on, to be able to process what's going on, and to be able to notice what you notice. That's living at the speed of presence, okay? So the Dixie Chicks, this all started with the Dixie Chicks in Wide Open Spaces, 1998. They sang a song about a girl leaving home and mom singing like, oh my God, this girl, and I wrote the lyrics down. She needs wide open spaces, room to make the big mistakes. She knows, I blew it. She needs wide open spaces, room to make her big mistakes. She needs new faces, and she knows the high stakes. It's like, what do you do when you turn off the things that make you matter in order to find out what really matters underneath? Those stakes are high. It means you have to make choices and decisions on what you're going to do and who you want to be and what your true self is, and then come at that. And if you're parenting, how do you come into your parenting from your true self? If you're working, how do you meet your coworkers in your true self? If you are in a partnership, how do you bring that present, aware, true self instead of operating out of all of these reactions and fight or flight symptoms? How do you find out who that true self is? So my suggestion, take a road trip. Take Brene Brown with you. Go find the wilderness. And this is what I do as a coach. So when you get to that point where you're making some discoveries, give me a call. I would love to be there for you. You can find me on DeniseDrydenCoaching.com. And have a wonderful Sunday. And I got a week in Montana to play in the snow and enjoy it. So take care. Bye-bye.